Welcome to the Default Profitable Podcast. You're listening to the next episode. Today we're going to focus on the nonprofit sector, what it takes to start, run, and grow a business. We'll talk about some successes, some failures, and some actual stories. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Jennifer Pope-Baker. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, so I look forward to this. A little bit different than most of the people that we've talked to, but why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes, introduce yourself and your business to the audience?
Thanks. So I am the founder and CEO of MVP Giving, which is boutique philanthropic services firm, and I specifically focus on supporting people in the professional sports community, athletes, coaches, owners, also working with franchises and athletic departments, helping them think about, one, with the franchises, how do they support their players, or do they need help with their giving? And then with athletic departments, helping them think about helping athletic departments when they're meeting with their students and their parents or guardians to talk about the impact of NIL when they bring in all the different advisors. That I'm also one of the advisors talking about how do you add philanthropy into the mix, which is particularly difficult when you're talking about young people who are extraordinarily young, some that don't even have a 2 in their age yet.
How did you get here?
Well, it was an interesting journey. I was listening to your podcast with John DeLucia earlier today, and his dad, Jerry DeLucia, was responsible for bringing me here almost 35 years ago. I moved to Indianapolis to work for the United Way, which was the start to a career in the nonprofit community. I started out there and learned incredible lessons from Jerry DeLucia that I carry today. And then I moved on to a couple of smaller nonprofits. I worked in the health field. I worked in sports. And then I moved to the Central Indiana Community Foundation, where I was the president of Women's Fund of Central Indiana for almost 24 years.
And then you decided to go pro sports. What drove that?
It was time when I left Women's Fund. I had an incredible career there and really grew as a professional and grew as a woman and had phenomenal opportunities, both locally, nationally, and even internationally through my work there. It was time for them to have a new leader. It was time for me to stretch and grow. And I figured I had at least one really good rodeo left in me. From the very beginning of my nonprofit career, I had the opportunity to work primarily with professional athletes, coaches, and then also franchises in general, where folks would often say, oh, let's just ask them for $10,000 or $100,000, $1,000,000. Well, do you know, I like to give the example of, do you know that Caitlin Clark or Tyrese Halliburton or Anthony Richardson's interested in saving hamsters? I don't know, but they've got the money. And what I heard time and time again from folks who were in those positions is they didn't know who to trust. They felt taken advantage of. And they appreciated someone who would just listen to them, help them discern the best way to use their philanthropic dollars. And so I spent about a year and a half after I left Women's Fund thinking about what I wanted to do. I did some nonprofit consulting and decided I really didn't want to raise money for a living anymore. And decided to throw my eggs in this basket and give it a try. I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care where people choose to give as long as they're making smart choices. And that's, what I do. Help them think about, all right, you're being flooded with phone calls and text messages and emails and letters about give here, give there. Well, I can be your charitable receptionist. I can go through all of that and help you out. I can help you create a plan that establishes your legacy, or if that's too big to think about right now, let's just talk about the fact that your financial advisor or your mother or your coach said you need to give some money away. All right, well, you don't have time to do that right now. I can help you think about that. Let's talk about the things that are most moving to you. What do you see in your world that you want to preserve or you want to change? Let's start there. And then I can come back with recommendations. So I do the research, do the vetting, and then present opportunities. They make the decisions, and then I make it all happen for them.
It sounds like you have a passion for the nonprofit sector, but what you're really doing is helping people understand what charity even means.
That's right. So many people don't even know what it means or what do they do with that. And it used to be, I taught a philanthropy education class at Women's Fund the entire time I was there for young adult women. And I would always ask the question, when did you first learn about philanthropy? When did you first see it in action? 9 out of 10 times that they saw it in their house of worship. And I've been really curious how that is changing for people as places of worship no longer pass a basket that you give online. Where are they seeing that modeled now? And then there are options. You might want to give all of your money to your house of worship. You might want to give all of your money to a school or to a place that has been important to your family. But let's talk about what's important to you. And sometimes people don't even know what's important to them, or they don't know how to verbalize that. They might just say, well, food. I want to give money to a food pantry. Nobody needs me for them to write a check to a food pantry. But if you want to talk about providing the kind of funding that helps the food pantry think about cultural competency, who comes to that food pantry? What kind of food do they want to have? Do they all live in an apartment building where everybody knows the landlord hasn't fixed the stoves in years, so they're all cooking on a hot pot or in a microwave? Okay, what kind of food do we have that they want, that they understand, that they can cook in that way? And can we provide all of those pieces of equipment that they might need to do that? And then are the people who are shopping at the food pantry actually shopping, or are they just getting a bag? And are they helping make decisions? So if you want to influence that, I'm here to help you. If you want to say, I don't want anybody to go hungry, to go to bed with an empty belly. All right, let's talk about bold and transformative giving that will need to take place a long time. Where do we start? Who do we start with, and what are we going to do? And you need partners to do that. You can't just write a check, but what's happening along with that. And that really comes, that bold and transformative giving comes when someone has time to invest and not just dollars to invest. Because I cannot make bold and transformative decisions for people, but I can give them options and opportunities. And I also can explore things for them that they can't, because nobody needs to know who I'm talking about when I call to inquire for information. I can say I'm helping someone learn these things and do that for them.
Well, and one of the things, as somebody that's never worked for a nonprofit, that entire world has a language and a dialect of its own.
That's right.
And so if you got somebody who's in their 20s, who's an athlete, who's never worked in the nonprofit space, they probably don't have they can't translate.
That's correct. Or they don't even know what they don't know.
Right.
They don't know the kinds of questions to ask. And when I was considering starting this business, I spoke with the people that I worked with previously, but I also did a lot of research. And one of the things that I learned was that people were giving money to places that they thought they were doing good things with their money, and they weren't. That 32 cents on the dollar was going to whatever the issue is. All right. So I can help vet that. I know the questions to ask about the strength of an organization. I know how to read a nonprofit financial statement. I know how to look and see who's on that board. What kind of programs are they delivering? Are they delivering to, or are they delivering with? Who's making the decisions? And do those line up with this particular person's values? And then help them think about, all right, this is the risk. If you give here for this purpose, your risk is 0, or it's 1 to 3, or you know what? This is a great agency, and I know that you love it, and I know why. They're providing great programming, but behind the scenes, they are a 10 red risk. And this is why. And so if you make an investment, this is what could happen, and these are the kinds of things that you should put in place to ensure that gift is used well. And oh, by the way, you know what? There are a lot of funders in this community collaborating to make sure that that red 10 behind the scenes goes down to a 0. So I feel good about that. Or you know what? I'm not seeing support from other funders in this community for that. So your red 10 behind the scenes could be just a really bad investment, even though the money that does hit the kids does make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's not all charities are created equal.
That's right.
And most people don't realize that there are ways to tell the difference. There are agencies, and there are people like you with 30 years of experience reading the paperwork, which is all there if you know how to understand it.
Right. Well, and another thing that I discovered with Women's Fund, when we would look at proposals, sometimes we get the most beautiful proposal. It had all the right language in it, and it was the right font, and everything was perfect package. But their programming was very average. And then we get something you just think, oh my goodness, it's handwritten and there's things crossed out, the typing, or maybe it's typed, it's crossed out and handwritten things in there. And the executive director is the same one who's emptying the trash. And she wrote this proposal at 10 o'clock at night at her kitchen table. But you know what? The people who are going to that organization are getting outstanding services and the money is used really well. So it's being able to go beyond the paper and understand that what you don't see. It's looking at boards. And so many times, especially with small organizations, people join because they're excited about the cause, but they have no idea what their legal or fiduciary responsibility is. And sometimes the leader of that organization doesn't know either because they had a great idea that people are lining up to support, but they didn't understand what it really means to lead a nonprofit because there are significant laws, IRS regulations that are governing how nonprofits work. And a lot of people don't realize that, which has gotten a lot of athletes in trouble when they start foundations because they don't understand what they need to do and they don't have someone to guide them. And I think that the IRS shines a special light when high profile people start a foundation and then they're paying their mother, their best friend, or somebody else $500,000 to run it, and that person doesn't really know what they're doing. And I'm not even talking about nefarious things. I'm just talking about people just don't understand.
So how long has MVP giving existed now?
Well, I filed my papers for incorporation maybe 8 or 9 months ago, and then I felt like I was really a real organization when my website was live in October. And, I'm different than a lot of entrepreneurs because what I have is my intellectual property, my experiences, my expertise, but I'm not selling a product. I don't have things in a warehouse that I'm trying to move. And I'm also working with a population that has more gatekeepers than you've ever met in your life. And so it's a slower ramp up than perhaps someone who is selling a tangible product to a much wider public market.
So what after 30 years, you've got all the experience and all the business knowledge, but when you stand up as a solopreneur, basically, what don't you know, or what have you had to learn that you didn't realize you didn't know in the first 9 months?
Well, I would say that I did not understand how much time some of the things take to be established. And because of the kind of career I've had, I've always had a team of people. And also working at the community foundation, which is very well funded. Well, I was the only person for a while, and then I had an assistant. I always had an amazing board that I worked with, great staff at the community foundation. So while I had to create a budget and follow it and understand it, I didn't have to do really much more than that when it came to tracking numbers. That I had someone who would help me with that. And I've always had the opportunity to find the people who are smarter than me to do the work that either I don't know how to do, I don't do well, or I knew somebody could do a lot better than me. I have to do everything by myself now. And so that has taken longer than I anticipated. And I have worked, made the decision to spend money to work with some companies that do what I need that I can't do. A website is a great example. the company that I worked with, I've known for a long time. And I didn't even realize going into that relationship how much time it was going to take because I had the good fortune before of somebody else who was doing the work behind the scenes with them. So I think that's been the biggest surprise to me. And I've never been too good to do those kind of things. I've just had the fortune to have people who could do those things along with me. So learning how to do everything myself, I definitely underestimated the amount of time it would take to do the work of owning a business.
Well, it's funny because, I get people all the time that work for a big company and they say, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to start my own business." And my first response is always, "All right, how do you get a stapler?" And they're like, "Oh, I just tell my assistant." And I'm like, "No, you go to Staples. You have to go buy it. You have to go on Amazon. There's nothing that's done for you anymore."
That's exactly right. When I decided to, I think I started with a smart approach, though. I talked to people I knew who had been consultants and talked to them about how they valued their time, put a dollar amount on it. I met with other people that I respected and knew in the community to say, hey, as I'm thinking about how do I monetize this, I talked to a lot of people to get good advice. I met with my accountant and said, all right, what kind of business entity do I need to be? And that they do my payroll for me. And so I met with my attorneys and they created agreements that I can use with clients. So I did shop things out, but then it comes to a point where it's here and I have to do that part. I can't say to somebody, I want to do blah, 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 and they make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's been, I think this is episode 119. I mean, probably one of the most overwhelming messages from this has been don't save money on your attorney and accountant.
Right.
Pay those people because you're going to need to make sure that work's done right. And then you're going to step back and say, okay, everything that's inside you now, you got to figure out how to get out. And you talk to people about how to bill for your time and how to bill for your knowledge, which is good.
It would be really easy. I could have on day one met with somebody and help them do all the work that I described. But
Yep.
the infrastructure was necessary, and that was just more intensive than I expected.
It always is. So if you go back, if 2025 Jennifer were to go back and sit next to 2024 Jennifer a year ago, you're getting ready to start this. And you say, listen, there's going to be a million things that come at you, but here's the one thing you need to do first. What would that be?
There's so many things. I think patience is really what it is being patient with myself. When I was working with the company's Innovative to do my website, and they did some video for me because I'm using spoke note technology on my business cards and in other ways as well. So I knew that they could help me do a great 60-second video. And then they ended up doing a website, which is just a fancy word for a landing page. I should have really spent a little bit more time reviewing what I wanted to do because when they were working for me, it's like, oh, yeah, but let's just change this just a little bit. So I find that I continue to need to tweak the way I'm verbalizing things in a video, when I speak, when it's presented in writing. But if I had waited till it was perfect, I never would have started. So I think patience is with myself is the most important thing because I want it to be perfect the first time. I have moved well beyond best practice. I want to do next practice. I know that I have things to offer that nobody else can do. And so for me, it's being patient with myself and how I capitalize on that and find the right language for it.
Well, it's funny. So I have a friend who started a business, and actually, he's a very creative guy, but we make fun of him because he had 7 versions of his business cards before he made his first sales call. And he was waiting for them to be perfect. And I'm like, dude, you just need to go sell something at this point.
Right.
You got to pay for you got to pay for version 8 of the business cards. Let's go make a sale. So,
Yeah. I at least waited to print them until I knew what I wanted.
It's interesting, because it seems like such an obvious thing that most people probably don't realize the complexity of giving to charity and actually the complexity of legacy and what people are giving to charity for.
Right.
That you've already kind of laid out. That's really what you help people with. So patience is a big one, and better than best. It's just do it and then do the next. What else? Is there any other message you'd give to somebody who's who's sitting where you were 18 months ago and starting to think about doing their own thing? Any other message you'd give them?
I would say that start with the experts, that start with a lawyer, start with your accountant, make sure that you have a good banker. And while I don't have a physical product I sell, I have a brother who does. So I've learned a lot of lessons there. And gosh, just being really thoughtful that you have all the right people in your corner. And it's not just having a regular attorney. You need an attorney that specializes in what you do and who understands that. I think the other thing is to not minimize how important it is to have a second set of eyes on everything that you do. And I think that I am a good writer. I think I can express myself well. And I happen to have a daughter who's a linguist, and every single thing that I'm going to send to somebody, she goes over, I pay her to review that for me to make sure that I'm presenting things in a professional manner, that I didn't leave a word out or verb tense agreement or anything like that. And so having a second set of eyes, because you don't get a second chance for a first impression. And you don't want somebody to say, I'm not going to work with this person because they can't even remember to put two S's in professional, right? And so people lose opportunities for small things where they just need to take the time to make sure everything is correct, but not in such a way that you're looking at 8 different business cards.
There's a limit.
Right.
All right. Well, I think those are good. Those are good lessons. Be the expert, but hire experts. Do it right, but don't plan on doing it perfectly. At some point you got to launch.
That's
So
right. That's right. I think knowing the difference between when you need to hire an expert and when you just need to do it yourself. But for me, doing it myself did not include accounting or a lawyer. And I cannot say enough how important it is to have a second set of eyes on everything. When you're doing it by yourself and you're not by the water cooler, you're not saying, hey, take a look at this. You have to be very intentional and purposeful to find that.
all right. Well, those are all great messages. There's a quick 25 minutes. So
Thank you.
yeah. Well, hey, listen, I want to remind everybody that's listening, you'll be able to find information about Jennifer and her business at defaultprofitable.com and on the episode webpage. And if you're listening, there's 3 ways you can help us grow. You can subscribe, you can leave a review, and you can share the episode. Jennifer, I'd like to thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. And for people listening, we'll be back next week with another episode of Default Profitable. Until then, stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.